Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. We are incredibly excited to bring you this event. And of course, this was originally supposed to be a live event in Tampa, Florida. And then the coronavirus happened. So we had to change our plans and kind of roll with it. But I truly want you to feel that I'm connecting with you personally today, wherever you are. You may be in pain, and it has not been an easy time for everyone. So for you to have enough hope and fight left in you to be on this conference today really truly says a lot about where you are mentally, where you are in your healing stage. And I want to commend you for taking the time to sit in and watch a 2-hour conference. So a little bit about how this is going to go. I'm going to speak, and then we're going to leave about 20 minutes, longer if we need it, for questions and answers. Please use the chat box and type your questions in, and I'll try to get to as many questions as we can. Also want to let you know that when we're done, we'll be sending you a link of this. So if you miss anything, don't worry about it. Don't worry about taking too many notes. You can go back and watch it again later. When I'm done speaking, we're going to have a short intermission to give everybody a washroom break, and then I will be introducing Dr. Hannah Lee. She has incredible information for you today. I also want to thank you guys for the money you spend on the ticket to watch this event, because that money is 100% going to be donated to the Burning Limb Foundation. This foundation is a nonprofit organization that is very close to my heart. It was started by a gentleman called Philip Robert. Philip was a patient of mine years ago, and he came here with complex regional pain syndrome, which had gone into remission. But Philip has another condition affecting the valves in his leg and causing daily chronic pain. He has a corporate job, and on top of that, he managed to form this foundation, and all their profits are donated to patient cases, patient care, and specifically care that is not covered by established insurance coverage. Philip spends many, many hours on the ground with you guys, talking to you about his own experiences. He's as close as an angel on earth that I've ever met, and he's just really near and dear to my heart. So all this money will be donated to the Burning Limb Foundation and will directly go to benefit somebody that may be in your shoes. So thank you for that. My story, how did I get to this point? Why did I pick complex regional pain syndrome and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and chronic nerve pain, all these hopeless cases with people that have nowhere to turn? Well, I started off just normal practice as a chiropractor. My father is a chiropractor, and a very good chiropractor, and also one of my most important mentors. And my dad always traveled. We lived in South Africa, that's where I grew up. And he would come to the United States, go to Europe, always looking for new techniques to become better and better. And when I was a little girl, I remember once asking him, "Dad, why do you keep traveling? What drives you?" And I'll never forget his answer. He said, "Katinka, it is not the 8 out of 10 patients that you can help that drives you. It's the 2 out of 10 patients that you cannot help." And that became my creed. Those 2 out of 10 people that receive a diagnosis, they go on the internet, and it is a diagnosis of doom. All you guys see is that it's incurable, that there is no help besides pain relief, constant ketamine infusions, spinal cord stimulators. And I just think that there has to be someone out there believing that your bodies can recover, believing in the body's innate, incredible process to heal itself. You know, I always have this talk with my patients, but we sort of take for granted how incredibly intelligent our bodies are. If you just think what it takes to grow a hair on your head, the incredible intelligence that goes into that process, so that there is not a scientist in the world today that can create a hair out of nothing and make it grow and create that life. That intelligence has not left your body. It is inside of you. It is there. And I believe in your body's innate intelligence and ability to heal from the inside out with the help of correct coaching and support to support that healing process, identifying blocks keeping you from getting better. And some of those blocks are what we are going to be talking to you about today. So I was in practice and I was miserable in practice, just seeing, run-of-the-mill chiropractic patients, back pain, neck pain, headaches, occasional children, colic babies. And I was not fulfilled. That was not my mission. I wanted to be passionate about what I did, because living your passion, working every day with something that you're passionate about is one of the greatest gifts that we can ever receive, and something I'm grateful for every day, because for many years I practiced without it. Then I found my first technique that really got me excited about it. Was a technique that focuses on stimulating the vagus nerve, which I'll be covering more in a little bit. And I came home and started seeing patients, but I wanted to see the worst of the worst, the most hopeless of hopeless patients. And so Carlos came along. And I hope Carlos will watch this at some point, because he knows how near and dear his story is to my heart. Carlos was in his 30s. Him and his wife just had a baby, and Sean was 9 months old. And I will never forget, him and his wife came in. She was holding their baby. And Carlos, who is a Hispanic gentleman, was as white as a sheet. He had full body complex regional pain syndrome that led to gastroparesis, which you guys may know all about, but basically it is complete paralysis of the GI tract. And what that meant for Carlos was, not only did he have full body burning as if he was on fire, when he tried to eat, it would feel like his insides were just set on fire from the throat down to his digestive tract. And he would just curl up in pain. And so he was down to just chicken broth, and had expressed to his wife that he no longer wanted to live in that type of pain, which she understood. And she said, let's just look for one more doctor. And he was humoring her. And he said, whatever, if you want me to go see one more doctor, I will, but you need to let me go. And so I was that one more doctor. And I'll never forget the day they walked in. I walked into our break room in the back, and I told my dad, what if I can't help him? This guy may kill himself. And my dad said, but what if you could? And so it was a real turning point in my career. Carlos lay down on my table. We did the vagus nerve procedure. 10 minutes later, his pain had dropped from a 10 to about a 6, which for normal people may not seem like a big deal, but you guys know what it feels like if you wake up and it's a good day and your pain is not a 10, but an 8, or not an 8, but a 6. That is a really good day that most normal people cannot begin to comprehend. What's more is he left that night, went to a restaurant, I believe it was a Luby's cafeteria, which is back then especially high dining here in Arkansas, and ate a full meal without any pain. And he came back the next day with hope on his face. And that was the single most addictive feeling I have ever felt in my life. The ability to hand that hope to a patient again, where before they had none. And so it is my greatest hope today that in watching this, you will get the message that others can recover, that your body may be able to recover, that no matter what you read on the internet, you are not allowed to give up. You have to keep fighting and believing in your body, because your life is precious. I want to read you guys one of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to read it so I don't mess it up. It's by Mary Oliver, and it says, "Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" You guys, even though you may not feel that you're contributing much because you're in so much pain, there is every chance that you have people around you that dearly love you, even when you're broken, even when you're constantly in pain, even if you're bedridden. Your life matters. You were born for a reason. I personally believe that. And the impact of healing and recovery is so great because those circles circle out, and it affects your mom and your dad and your partner and your children. When they can get you back whole, that truly is a magnificent thing. So please hold on to the gift of life that you were given, and the incredible, precious nature of life. That's my story. That's how we started. And how we developed our system has happened kind of slowly over the last 9 years. So often I will have people really almost every day contact me on the internet, or my patients asking me, why is it that other people across the world do not offer your system? And so that is something I definitely want to touch on today. Our system is complex in the sense that we now offer 15 or 16 different therapies, and we all use it pretty much at the same time over 10 to 12 weeks. My philosophy, I always call it a philosophy of shock and awe, meaning you have to absolutely target and bombard the nervous system with every type of support that you can think of to, number one, identify why the patient got sick in the first place. Number two, remove those blocks, neutralize them, support the body to heal, and then you have to strengthen the body. And that strength comes from multiple avenues. It's not just strengthening your physical body, getting you out of a wheelchair to walking, to running, fighting atrophy, but it is about emotional strength. The emotional strength that you have to leave our program, to know that you can do this on your own. You can get back to life. You can fall, you can hit that CRPS leg or arm, and that your body can recover on its own. In a sense, your body disappointed you and betrayed you. That's very much what it feels like. And you have to learn that with the correct support, when your nervous system is functioning correctly again, your body can absolutely recover from injuries. Carlos's case is now 9 years old, and that means he's been in remission for about 9 years. Um, it's a touchy subject. The word cure in this community is a dirty word, and we're not supposed to use it. I always say, I don't care what you call it. You can call it pineapple. But if you can go 9 years and have surgeries and have injuries, and the CRPS does not recur, then that remission sure resembles a cure. And again, it doesn't matter what terminology we use. Our philosophy is that the body can be strengthened to be self-sufficient again. So why is the system not out there? First off, we have a very specific way of choosing our therapies. I have a sort of esoteric belief that things are sent my way. I know it sounds kooky and out there, but it has always worked for me. Some of my greatest therapies were passed along to me by previous patients, because we encourage people to go out and attain perfection if they did not get that here. So, for example, our neuromuscular reeducation. I had a patient from Little Rock that was here. She was very active, early 40s, beautiful woman, and she wanted to do yoga. She was a cyclist, she was a runner, and the CRPS was in her wrist and arm. And so when she left, her pain had dropped to a zero, but she still had no strength in the arm. And she said, I want to do yoga, I want to do downward dog and do all these positions. And I said, Laura, I just don't think that's a good idea. Your pain is down, you can go back to work. Let's call it a day at that and just see how your body does over the next year. She came back to me 4 weeks later, and she had 100% strength back in that wrist. And I said, what in the world did you do? And she said, Dr. K, I can take a cast iron skillet that's really heavy, pick it up with my hand and toss it over my head. And I've done this and it was fine. I have all the strength back. I've got to tell you about this therapy. And so the first thing I did, I contacted the person who delivered the therapy. I communicated with the company. I got my staff trained, and one of their top therapists became a therapist in my office, and we perfected that therapy. We still use it to this day. It's one of our cornerstones. So that's just one example of how we found something. Typically, if I get stuck with a patient and we don't see progress, that is very frustrating for me. They teach you in chiropractic college and medical school that you're not supposed to be emotionally attached to the patient's outcome. And it's not because your doctor is uncaring, it's because we have to protect ourselves from the emotional stress of becoming attached to our outcomes. In case we don't see good outcomes, we still have to get out of bed in the morning and help the next person and the next person. Fortunately or unfortunately, I was not born with that gene, and I'm not able to emotionally disconnect from my patients. And so, if we do not perform well, if the patient does not see the outcome that they want, that is a puzzle to me that I have to solve. And then we search for other things. So, a lot of our breakthroughs came because of cases we were stuck on, and then we brought in a therapy that made that breakthrough and then continue to do it with difficult cases, and then we keep the therapy. Because we have to try to keep our costs down and we have a very large staff, we're out of space, so we have to move into a much bigger building, and all of that is very expensive. We will abandon a therapy that's not quite as successful as the new therapy if it can be replaced. Then we stop doing the old therapy and we adopt the new therapy. For sure, if you have a doctor that is serving you well, they have to have an open mind, they have to care about your outcome, and they have to be willing to look at things that are working for other people. There is nothing worse than when I pick up the phone to call a doctor in a patient's hometown and say, would you like to train in my technique? Can I give you direction? And they say, no, I'm good with what I'm doing. How do you know? Are you helping 10 out of 10 of your patients? Because if you're not, you have to be singularly obsessed to increasing your success rates. You have to be open-minded, even if these therapies are coming from a school of thought that you were not necessarily exposed to in your training. We have a doctor under our care right now that was a surgeon, and he told me this has been the greatest emotional and spiritual journey of his life, because he was exposed to all these treatments that may seem really weird and really goes against his Newtonian physics training, which is left brain, where things are science-based, chemistry-based, all backed up by scientific studies, and open his mind to what is possible, maybe things he didn't learn in school. And he's doing really, really well because he was able to do that. So her system is complex. It does not just consist of one single treatment. The second you walk in our door, once we complete your initial physical exam and we start your treatment, is that we start running right off the ground. We hit the ground hard. It is a balancing act immediately of doing therapies that if you did them by themselves at home, if you got up and walked a block, you would be in bed for a week afterwards. So then we have to mitigate the anger we cause in the nervous system or the upset with therapies that calm everything down. So it's a slow, I always picture it as climbing a sheer rock wall with picks, or an ice wall where you have your one pick and then you drag yourself up and you have your next pick, and it's step by step. It's one of the most difficult processes you will ever go through in your life. Big part of our treatment here is the attitude of our staff. Each staff member is handpicked by me. Recently, we started personality tests to make sure they fit in well with the team and they have the qualities we need to see for them to work with people in desperate pain. But the secret sauce, the number one ingredient, is that the staff member has to become emotionally attached to your outcome. They have to have enough empathy that they're not just showing up for a paycheck, but they when they go home at night, if they have a case, if one of my therapists has a case that is not doing well, that they're constantly thinking about how they can help that patient, thinking outside the box to solve this very complicated puzzle. And so to take that system and just hand it in a manual to another doctor and say, here's 9 years worth of training, make this work, is incredibly difficult. And that's part of the problem. Not to say that we're not trying. I instructed my first group of doctors in February in New York City. I partnered up with a doctor from Milan, Italy, and he uses a technique that started out treating herniated discs, very severe discs, and tinnitus, ringing in the ears, which is traditionally in all sorts of healing arts a very difficult thing to get results with. But Dr. Manuel Mazzini gets incredible results with this condition. And so our mutual business coach thought we should meet. We combined our work, which is all autonomic nervous system based work. And we have this amazing technique that wakes up the vagus nerve. So we are teaching other doctors. And if you have a doctor that's interested, if you contact us after this, we can get them in touch with the right person so that we can let them know when the next training is. We also are looking at doing our first research study through Kent State University starting this year. But again, that's a question we get all the time. Why don't you guys publish your research? Why aren't you research more? It is such a complicated process. First, you have to handpick patients that all have the same area of, let's say, complex regional pain syndrome. There are lots of criteria that will have them qualify or not qualify for the study. Then we have to bring them in from all corners of the country and the world. We're not allowed to talk to them, to emotionally bond with them, to give them any of the emotional support that we think is vital to the treatment process, because it's a purely scientific thing. You have to go in, not say a word, do the treatment, and a staff that is not connected to us then records the data about how they're progressing or not progressing. We are not allowed to do our 16 therapies all at once. Again, I think that's a vital part of our treatment system. We have to pick one, at the most two of our therapies, and we can only perform those two. Then if we see results, we get permission to slowly add more and more therapies. So that's why research has been such an incredibly slow process. But I am excited that we will get started with that this year. So you guys all want to know, how does it work? What is it that you do in Arkansas? I'm going to run you through some of our biggest treatment systems and just briefly talk about how they work. First off, we tackle the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is one of 12 cranial nerves that exits your brain on each side. It runs with the carotid artery and the jugular vein, and then it goes down into your thorax, into your abdominal cavity, and the vagus nerve pretty much connects with every major organ. We used to think that it didn't connect with the kidneys and bladder, but now more and more through research, they're finding that it does. The vagus nerve is an incredibly intelligent nerve. Think of it as almost a second spinal cord. I believe that we are just touching on what we think we know about the central nervous system. And certainly it's true for that nerve. That nerve is intelligent. It controls the immune system, and it also acts as a ladder between your intestines and your vital organs and your brain. So not only do you have what we call efferent communication, meaning going down, but we have communication coming up from the organs. That nerve, for various reasons, will stop doing its job. The most common reason that we're finding, and that Dr. Hanali is going to talk about extensively, is infections somewhere in the body. Now, you may be watching this and say, but my doctor looked at my blood work. There is no infection. We have seen more than 400 patients with complex regional pain syndrome alone now. And we have for years now been doing basic CBCs with differentials on those patients. And when you look at this patient population with a holistic view, meaning you're looking at the whole body, not just one part, you start to see certain signs that you see all the time. And if you see the same culprit over and over, after a while, you have to say, something's going on here. There is a connection, which is part of why we're sharing our data with the CRPS world, with the Ehlers-Danlos world. Because we believe there is a lot of value in the data that we're finding. And it's kind of like a burglar in your house that came in, that broke in and stole your stuff, and then they leave, and then you walk through your house and you say, but there's no burglar here. That's typically how blood work is looked at. What you have to look for are much more subtle signs that there was an infection, the fingerprints that the burglar left behind, that there's a low-level infection still going on. Most often, that is a viral infection. A big one that we're finding is the Epstein-Barr virus. But I'm going to leave all that for Dr. Hanali to go over. So what all that means is if you have a small infection somewhere in your system, let's say it's affecting the pancreas or the spleen or your colon, it doesn't have to be a big infection, guys. Just a small infection in the right spot will then alert small cells called glial cells. They're messenger cells that can communicate with the vagus nerve. They're like soldiers or messengers that go to the vagus nerve and say, alert, alert, infection. And the vagus nerve will act as if there is a massive threat to your central nervous system. In addition, they have found through independent studies with conditions like Parkinson's now, there is a very specific protein that's found in the brains of patients who suffer from Parkinson's disease. It's a folded protein that they look for that you see with Parkinson's cases. But first, before they find it in the brain, they find it in the gut. And so what they found with mice is if they cut the vagus nerve, the proteins will never make it to the brain. And what we have found in our work is that the vagus nerve very much can act like a ladder for infections. It causes inflammation of the brain itself. You guys will often feel that you have brain fog. Your memory is affected. You cannot remember from one minute to the next basic things like the birth dates of your children, things that you should know by heart. And so there is a reason for that, and that is inflammation in the central nervous system, which is a very big part of what we do. In the first few weeks, if you are stable and it is safe to draw blood, we run a simple CBC with differential to check for chronic infections, bacterial and or viral. And then we treat those as you're going through the process so that when you go home, those infections are under control. Vagus nerve stimulation is done in two ways. We stimulate the vagus nerve here, just under the jaw, which is light pressure. It is not a violent move. It is not a traditional chiropractic adjustment because you guys tend to be very fragile. And so we apply light pressure to the vagus nerve, to the auricular branch of the vagus nerve to reactivate that nerve. But we have found just through the last 6 months or so, a major breakthrough in our work is that if you can also activate the vagus nerve and the GI tract so that the organ essentially, it's like when you were still going to school and your mom would gently shake you in the morning and say, honey, it's time to wake up and go to school. Same thing, the organ gently alerts the vagus nerve that it's time to wake up. 80% of vagus nerve stimulation is afferent stimulation, meaning it's from the bottom up. So we do vagus nerve stimulation. We manage any infections. Then we have neuromuscular re-education. Think of neuromuscular re-education as PT on steroids and then some. So when you guys watch our videos, and I highly encourage that you join our Facebook page, Spero Clinic, follow us on Instagram. Every single week we're posting success stories. We're showing what patients are going through. We're showing as they're coming out of their chair for the first time or moving their hand for the first time, so you can track their progress. Patients come in and they have muscle atrophy. They have lost the ability to move. And so if we only have 10 to 12 weeks to get that patient from a wheelchair to perhaps running, you have to fight that muscle atrophy very aggressively. The way that therapy works is that you're hooked up to a very special direct current. It is an electric current. And I realized that some of you guys have had bad luck with electricity, but understand that we have done this with hundreds of patients. We don't just dive in, but we slowly wade into the pool with this electric therapy. So what we first do is what we call a search and destroy, where we actually use the current to let us know where you may have hidden areas of damage or miscommunication. Many of our patients come in and they have the most basic, simple problem that the central nervous system isn't fully connecting with the tips of their toes and their fingers. So there's a block in that electric movement of information through the body. So we identify those areas, and then we target those areas to restore communication. And then we get to work where we strengthen those areas. When you're hooked up to this machine, it's like you have Superman coming into your body for a visit, and you have super strength where every move on the machine, for every second, it's like 250 seconds of physical therapy. And so we see great gains. It's kind of like a scalpel. The machine is only as good as a therapist that's helping you through the process. And so our therapists are highly, highly trained with difficult cases such as your own, where they work with you an hour a day, 4 days out of the week, to take you through the process and to strengthen you and get you to these goals. That's why when you guys watch, when our patients ring the bell, when they graduate, they get to ring a bell. That process very much it consists of a therapist connecting with you and holding your hand, connecting to your goal, whatever is important to you, and getting you there. I don't know if you guys saw Anne's graduation this last Thursday. Her goal was from not being able to take a single step without excruciating pain to taking 10,000 steps a day. And when she left, she was at 3,000 steps. But we also have our own goals, which may be decreasing inflammation, getting your normal color back, building your muscles up so that you gain inches of muscles in, let's say, a week through your first 6 weeks of treatments. And so we focus very intently on those goals. Some of our other treatments center around toxicity in the body. If you've had infections, if you've taken a lot of medications, ketamine is one that comes to mind. That can be very difficult for us to work around. A patient with a very toxic liver cannot heal and heal from chronic pain. That is a major obstacle. So detoxification becomes crucial. One of those steps to detoxification is to get your lymphatic system to drain again and to work very well. We use a very special machine. It looks like a light bulb with this eerie green-blue light glowing out of it. We're using gases. Kryptonite is one of them, which I find very interesting because that's another Superman reference. And we run that over the skin. And when we have areas of stagnant lymphatic flow, it feels like you have honey on your skin. It's sticky. It doesn't move as well. So we encourage lymphatic drainage. We do foot baths to get some of those toxins out. We modify the diet. Dr. Honey uses IgG, food sensitivity testing, to identify your inflammatory culprits so that you can make better decisions when you're going home. We use emotional work. Most of our patients, when they come in, suffer from post-traumatic stress just because they've gone through this long, lonely process of pain that most of them at some point believe they would never heal from, and that is very traumatic. They may have gone through some traumatic treatments. Dr. Lucas uses a technique that focuses on emotional healing, where we identify those emotional triggers for you and help you to work through those. We have a treatment that is groundbreaking, where we use EEG equipment to record brainwave activity. And then we play that back to the patient as musical frequencies. What it sounds like is like a cat running across a piano. It's not the most fun thing to lay there for an hour and listen to these frequencies, but the brain is a very interesting organ. It cannot fix its own dysfunction unless you hold a mirror in front of it and show the brain that it's messing up somehow. The brain was trained to be like a soldier or a kamikaze fighter, where it goes in, its goal is to survive, not to be healthy. And absolutely, if there's an energy leak, if there is something that is not functioning correctly and it's not being repaired, after a while, the brain is trained to ignore that, even its own mistakes in function. So, for instance, if an animal is being attacked, first it's going to fight for its life. It's going to try to get away, and then it's physically going to try to fight. And when that no longer works, the animal may attempt to play dead. And that's a parasympathetic freeze response that a lot of our patients come in that state, where their brains are now playing dead, and it worked to survive, but it's not conducive to healing. And so this system identifies the brain that is in a parasympathetic freeze response or a flight or fight response, and shows that to the brain so that the brain can immediately rectify that malfunction. A big part of our treatment focuses on dysautonomia. Your autonomic nervous system is the nervous system that does everything without you having to think about it. It just does it on its own. When you go to sleep at night, you don't have to worry about whether the apple you ate at 6 o'clock is going to digest. Your body just, if it's functioning correctly, will take care of that. It will take out all the vitamins, all the good parts, and the rest is excreted as waste. That's an incredibly complicated chemical process that your body just does without you having to think about it. Every single second, your blood pressure is being regulated, your heart rate is being regulated, your hormones are being regulated. But one of the first things that tend to go haywire with chronic pain is the autonomic nervous system. And so that is a big focus in our treatments. When a patient is not progressing as they should, we would put them in the brain therapy, and usually immediately we will see big breakthroughs. Currently, we have a kid, I think he's just 20 years old, Thomas, going through treatment. And Thomas was a football player. That's where he had his original tib-fib fracture, which is a very horrible fracture. And he developed complex regional pain syndrome. And I always joke with him and I say, you're Thomas the Tank, because he's built like a tank. He's a big kid. And if you look at him, you would assume that he's very, very tough. But when Thomas was in neuromuscular reeducation, at very low frequencies, he would cry, ask for his mom, be very loud, and I had several therapists in the room just being really tough with him and saying, you've got to get it together. And Thomas's mom finally one day said, Dr. K, Thomas was always like this. He never could tolerate much stress, and all my antenna went off. And I thought, there's something to this. This kid is in a parasympathetic freeze response. So we treated his brain, balanced it. I think he only needed 3 or 4 treatments. got him back in therapy, and within one day he went from 60 on the machine to 100, which is the most intense frequency a patient can reach. It is very hard work to get to that intensity, and his pain dropped to a 0 to a 1. So the brain is an incredibly powerful tool if it's online with our goal and it's functioning the way it's supposed to be functioning. We have scar tissue treatments where we use sound waves to gently break up scar tissue. It's the same technology, the same company actually that developed the technology where they break up smaller kidney stones with sound waves in hospital settings. Scar tissue is a very strange thing. First off, I know you guys think of scar tissue as I had surgery or a cut and I can see where I have scar tissue. Scar tissue can be hidden. If you have a muscle that's not absorbing force, let's say you're just taking a step and that's force going into your leg every time you take a step, that sends a shock wave of stress through the leg biomechanically, moving up through the body. And if one muscle isn't working correctly, let's say most often we see that the hamstrings are mush, they're not turning on, and then the quad muscle is working much harder than it should be, then you'll have hidden pockets of scar tissue, areas of the tissue that's not functioning correctly. And it's very strange. Think of a river flowing, and then you have a boulder in that river. That boulder will create waves and affect the stream going downstream. Same with nerve system communication moving through the body. It will create an area of interference, creating ripples so that you may have scar tissue in your shoulder or your spine, and we never get to healing in the leg because the communication in the body is being affected. So we have that treatment. That brings me to a very important point. Most of you guys have gone through treatments where if you have GI dysfunction or nausea and headaches, accompanied by complex regional pain syndrome, you are sent to a GI doctor. So you have your pain management doctor, maybe you have a neurologist, and now you have a GI doctor. And the problem is that this whole dysfunction is not being seen as one central problem. It sort of is a beast with many heads, and each doctor is approaching that problem as a singular problem that you're now going to manage with medication from the outside. You guys, if you have a fire alarm going off and you put a wet towel over that fire alarm, that's not a good idea because your house is going to burn down. If your body has certain parts crying out with symptoms and pain, it is trying to communicate to you that there is a bigger issue. And while I certainly understand the desire to numb the pain, and you guys are certainly entitled to want to bring your pain down so that you can survive, it is not a long-term solution. One of the toughest medications that we work with is ketamine. Ketamine was designed to disconnect the central nervous system, to create an interference. It's a dissociative drug that helps you to not experience your pain anymore, when our whole goal is to reconnect the central nervous system with every single cell in your body. And if you don't have that connection, you're not going to heal. So one of the most successful ways to approach this program is to understand that if you have CRPS in your wrist or you have Ehlers-Danlos pain, the problem is not just where the pain is. The problem is with the entire body. And if someone is going to be successful in treating that, they have to approach you as a whole person with emotions, with stresses that got you to where you are, and an entire whole body that has to be treated as one single organism if you're going to have long-term success. How much time do we have? It's 11:44. Okay. I am going to speak to you guys again when all is said and done. So at this point, I want to open the floor to questions. You can type it into Messenger and I'm going to address as many as we can. If you need to run to the restroom and you want to watch the recording later to catch the questions, you can do that too. But at exactly noon Central, we'll have a short break as well.
Okay, we have a couple questions from Ryan first. The first question is, after we overcome the pain, do we still go to a pain management doctor, like if you were on opioids before?
That is a wonderful question. Patients will often ask me, do I have to get off all my medications before I come see you guys? And the answer is, number one, I am not a medical doctor, and the rules here in Arkansas in the United States are very strict about scope of practice. So we have wonderful doctors that we work with here locally that will help us and assist us in reaching your goal and in slowly decreasing your pain medication after you're under care and your pain levels that we carefully monitor start dropping. It is most ideal for you to stop taking your medication while you're under care if you're able to do so. But guys, our patients come in and they're taking enough pain medicine sometimes to kill a horse. It is crazy what the human body can become used to. So often they'll be on morphine and opioids and fentanyl patches, and you cannot just cold turkey off of that medication. Certainly, it is our goal to have you off of at least 80% of your medications while you're here. But when the patient has a pain pump, or something more serious, that's not always easily obtainable. So just depends on the patient case. But if we're having success with a patient, I can't think honestly of one case where the patient didn't start decreasing their pain medication while they were under care. Great question, Ryan. Thank you for asking that.
Okay, next question is from Julie. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Julie.
I know she's writing in from Canada. She says, I can no longer sleep on my own since developing CRPS. I also have chronic fatigue. Can treatment fix this? Not only fatigue because of sleep problems, but also post-exertion fatigue, for example, from taking a shower or getting dressed.
Julie, that's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking that, because that brings me to a very important point. Patients will always ask, can you fix this or can you fix that? And of course, that's a valid question, but I want you to start thinking about this in a different way. There is not a doctor in the world that can fix anything in your body. Your body has to heal from the inside out. If you have a cut, let's say you're chopping up cucumbers and you cut your finger, you don't look at that cut, Julie, and say, oh my gosh, well, I'm gonna have this cut for the rest of my life. No, your body is going to clot that, so your bleeding stops if it's working correctly. The skin will heal. You may be left with a scar, but that scar also has a function to strengthen that area. And so your body's fighting infection so that you don't get an infection and die from a small cut in your finger. All of that happens, and we take that for granted. That same intelligence is the intelligence that has to heal your body. If I have a cut, I can heal it. If you have a cut, I cannot heal it. If you have chronic fatigue, I cannot heal it, but I'm going to be your coach. So there are many reasons for chronic fatigue. You may have an ongoing infection depleting your ferritin levels, your iron levels. That's something we commonly see. So you may need some supplementation to get back on your feet. But chronic fatigue is a common symptom that goes along with chronic pain that we see will resolve when we're coaching the body to get back on its feet. So yes, there is a major school of thinking now that chronic fatigue is caused by chronic inflammation in the GI tract and by infections. And if you Google autonomic nervous system, chronic fatigue, and vagus nerve, VAGUS, vagus nerve, you're going to see some very, very interesting research on that. Sleep is another very common symptom. Sleep is part of your parasympathetic nervous system. That brings us back to your autonomic nervous system. When an animal is in fight or flight, it cannot sleep, and your body cannot sleep. And then you have to chemically force the nervous system to go to sleep at night. The problem is, over time, you have to take in more and more medication to get the same results. And there has to be a breaking point there. There's a limit to what your body can handle in pharmaceuticals. There is no limit to your symptoms and how bad that can get. Great question, Julie.
Okay, our next question is, if a child age 11 had treatment that reduced her pain to a 3 and she's now up and walking but still has pain and struggles if she hits the original place of injury, in your opinion, does she still have CRPS? Is she in remission? Would your program still help, or is she already on the road to recovery?
That is a tough question to answer without having all the facts on the table. But here's what I would say. When I'm treating a child, I always put myself in the parent's shoes. I think that's an important place to be as understanding and empathetic as I can be as that child's physician. I have children of my own. One recently suffered a very severe injury, and that really woke me up to what my parents are going through. So what I always ask myself is, what would I want for my child? Now, I don't have all the facts as of how the child got into remission. There is a chance that just through, having a child's nervous system that was able to get the child to a 3, that they could go into remission and stay there. But definitely it is a gamble, right? Because healthy bodies do not develop complex regional pain syndrome. So my question would be, is there a genetic factor? Is there an infectious factor that is still going on? And is that a ticking time bomb so that, there are enough signs that 3 out of 10 pain is not normal. It is still pain, even though it's a lot better, and I'm happy about that. But what if that child has another injury? What if they develop a severe viral infection? What if they're in a car accident and the same malfunction that was there before is still smoldering? Is that like a fire that's smoldering and come back to life? I always say with CRPS and chronic pain, you have to chop its head off and drive a stake through its heart and dot every I, cross every T to protect your child or to protect any patient, to know that they have armor on, ready to face the world, ready to go through trauma without a resurgence of symptoms.
Awesome. Next question is from Kelsey. She wants to know if patients with fibromyalgia have found relief with these therapies.
Yes, Kelsey. So actually, the first book I ever wrote was a fibromyalgia book, and we can actually include links to both my books when we send you the link to this conference, so you can just go get it on Amazon if you want. I've learned a lot since I wrote that book, but through my career, we have seen the same system work with fibromyalgia very successfully. It is still dysautonomia and malfunction of the central nervous system. Good question.
Okay, Robin wants to know, does this work with CRPS type 2 where there is evidence of nerve damage?
Yes, Robin, we actually get that question a lot. Obviously, each patient case is case dependent. One of the young kids I treated out of Florida, he's going to college here in Arkansas now. I'm so proud of his case. But I forget his original injury, but they actually removed some of his nerves, stripped some of his nerves of the myelin sheaths. And so he had very severe nerve damage. Now, while that means that your case may last a little longer sometimes, you have more scar tissue, more miscommunication, the central nervous system can heal from pretty traumatic trauma that you wouldn't expect that it's able to heal from. And sometimes if a main nerve is too damaged, the nervous system will develop side roads. So if the freeway is permanently destroyed or washed away, then you have small side roads that can also get you from A to B. But we have had type 2 cases that did very, very well. Thank you for your question.
I'm going to group these two questions together because they are both about therapies that we offer here. They want to know if we have had success and what your thoughts are on oxygen therapy as well as microcurrent.
Okay, so we offer both microcurrent therapy and oxygen therapy. Oxygen therapy while exercising is brilliant. So basically you have arteries and veins, and we all know about that. And then you have small, microscopically small capillaries. And they're so tiny that red blood cells that carry oxygen can actually not go through that tube. It's too small. And so then your body carries, if it's functioning well, oxygen-rich plasma. And when you have complex regional pain syndrome or other chronic pain, that plasma becomes oxygen poor for a variety of reasons. Now, your cells, think of them as little homes, independent homes. They communicate with each other, they have cell phone signals, but each one is its own little universe. And for your home to look good, you have to bring food in, flowers in, make it look pretty, but also you have to kick out garbage. You know, every week you drag your garbage to the curb and the city comes and it takes it away. And so your cells are the same. It has to be able to get rid of toxins and it has to let nutrients into the cell wall. When you don't get oxygen, the cells stop to do that. And one of the effects is that that cell will just keep swelling like a blob. And when they get big, they put pressure on the tiny capillaries that are already being choked off. And now you have this forest fire effect that's feeding itself. So if you open oxygen supply to that limb, and you do that by letting the brain think that it's being starved of oxygen, and the nervous system always wants to survive. So a last ditch effort is to open the capillaries forcefully. It's being overdriven by the central nervous system in a massive effort to get oxygen to your tissues. And when they open, we see our gap and we pump very pure oxygen into your blood. You're inhaling it. And so that's how we use oxygen therapy. It's a wonderful therapy. Frequency specific microcurrent. We use the MEND technology, is a fantastic way to bring inflammation down and target specific tissues to heal the frequencies of that tissue. Every tissue in your body has an energy fingerprint, a frequency fingerprint when it's functioning correctly. So you can target those tissues, let's say nerve tissue, and bring inflammation down and bring about healing in that way.
Okay, next question. Misty wants to know, once patients have achieved remission from CRPS, are non-elective surgeries recommended or not?
Surgery always makes me nervous, but sometimes you're going to have surgeries that you just cannot avoid. If you have a tooth that's decaying in your mouth, definitely an ongoing infection can bring its own hell about. So sometimes surgeries cannot be avoided. What I always say is that once you've been through care, there's every chance that you will be stable going through a surgery. And I've had some magnificent examples of that. One of my patients was a runner and she fractured her ankle and foot and leg. And so they had to put metal plates in, and then she developed CRPS. She woke up after that surgery of complex regional pain syndrome. She had a very brilliant surgeon in Chicago. So she came in and we treated her for 7 or 8 weeks and her pain was at a 0. And then I said, if you want to run again, okay, you're going to have to eventually get the metal out, because it kept rubbing up against the lateral malleolus, that ankle bone that sticks out on the side. Every time she ran, that metal would hit that bone. And first she said, you're crazy. I'm never going back in for surgery again. But then she said, you know, I want to run again. Surgeon agreed to do the surgery based on her symptoms, and she woke up after that surgery with no recurrence of complex regional pain syndrome. So is it somewhat risky? Yes. There are no guarantees in life. It depends on the surgery. But what I always say to patients is, once the system worked for you, we have every expectation that it's going to work for you again. So should you suffer a significant trauma that once again pushes you into symptoms, you can repeat the treatment, usually a much shorter version of the treatment, and bring that back under control.
Okay, I'm gonna do 2 more questions before we break. I also wanted to let you guys know we're saving some of your questions for Dr. Honnelly. So if they're not answered now, she will try to answer as many as she can. Okay, so I have a question from Jennifer. My daughter has CRPS in her right foot. She is 12 and has been non-weight bearing since October. She had a growth plate injury in her heel and received an HPV vaccine, which I feel might have triggered the CRPS. We are waiting to get into a medical program here in Ireland after the coronavirus. Her grandfather has MS, and I was wondering perhaps if she might have had a myelin sheath weakness in her DNA. So can you speak to the DNA and the HPV vaccine link?
Sure. It is very hard for me. It's Jennifer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Jennifer. I'm so sorry about your daughter. I can't imagine the pain you're going through watching your child suffer. So it's hard for me to speak as to her genetics because I haven't seen her genetic profile. I do believe that often complex regional pain syndrome patients will have a genetic predisposition for dysautonomia, for the autonomic nervous system to be injured. Now, that can be multifaceted. Maybe they have the MTHFR gene mutation, which means you're not getting rid of toxins as well as you should be able to. And often those patients can point to a family member that also developed a condition associated with dysautonomia, with the body attacking itself. That being said, genetics, think of it as a Pandora's box. You can have a Pandora's box that you were handed when you were born by your parents and their parents that is filled with all sorts of potential horrors, but it has a lock on it. And if you can strengthen that lock and figure out how to keep it locked, those horrors never have to come out. You don't have to be a slave to your genetics. Very important work to follow in this area is Bruce Lipton's work. He talks a lot about genes and how they are expressed. So just because your daughter may have this genetic weakness does not mean that she cannot recover and lock that box again. Now, vaccinations, very, very controversial subject. I'm going to speak my truth and tell you guys what we have seen. And I've seen dozens and dozens of young girls that within 3 months of the HPV vaccination developed symptoms of postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS, of complex regional pain syndrome. Think of that as a key. Maybe for 90% of patients or 95% of patients, it causes absolutely no issues. Maybe for another 90% of patients, mild reactions. But if you have a genetic predisposition to not get rid of toxins as you should, and then you bombard the body with a massive amount of toxins in the form of vaccination, yes, vaccinations do have toxicity associated with them, then you're going to run into a problem that could be the key that unlocked that Pandora's box. Now, my other question, and please understand me when I tell you, I have a waiting list of patients. We're trying to figure out how to help more patients because we're out of space and our new building is not going to be ready for another 2 years. So I don't need to talk anybody into care, but I would be remiss if I ask what this medical program is going to consist of. One of my pet peeves that pediatric patients are enrolled in are pain management programs, where the patient is often encouraged not to talk about their pain, to disassociate from their pain, to no longer discuss their pain. I find that inhumane if the pain is still there. Sure, if there were absolutely no other tools to help those patients and no hope of ever helping the patient, then yes, teach them to try to disassociate from their pain. But pain management programs often involves exposure therapy, meaning I've literally had patients, I'm thinking of Samantha now, where she had horrible migraines, full body complex regional pain syndrome, and loud noises would set off that pain. Touch would set off that pain. And in her program, very reputable program, I could name it here in the US, but I won't, but associated with a major university, they hit her with pool noodles all day and set off horns to just say, your nervous system just has to get used to this. And that's the same as slapping a child 200 times and say, if I slap you 200 times, you're not really going to pay attention if I slap you anymore. I'm very much in opposition of those programs. I think we can and should develop better options for our children rather than pain management and just working through the pain no matter what.
Okay, last question before our intermission, and it is from Dan. He's in New Zealand. He says, I'm based in New Zealand and constantly frustrated by the US definition of remission. For you, what is remission, or how would you describe what remission looks like as far as pain levels, movement, and mental state?
Hi, Dan. So my definition of remission is very specific. I have very high standards. For us to say that a patient has moved into remission, their pain has to be a 0 out of 10, 90% of the time. It is possible that upon drastic stresses, let's say a fall or a divorce, physical, chemical, or emotional stress, that you could have a brief few days of resurgence of pain, but then absolutely the body has to be able to calm it down. It also means living without limits. You know, if I say I can manage my pain, if I take my medication and I stay on my couch and I don't walk for more than 10 minutes at a time and I don't wear a shoe on my foot, or I wear my scooter, or I use my scooter when I go to the grocery store, to me, that is living in a small box. And if you stand up, you're going to hit your head, so to speak. We're we're designed to be free. We're designed to be able to rely on the strength of our bodies. That means if you want to run, you can run. If you want to walk, you can walk. If you want to jump into a cold pool or take a shower, you can do so without paying a price. It means living without limits. You guys, wonderful questions. We're going to have a short intermission, and while we have that intermission, we're going to play one of our videos. It's called Finding Hope. It's one of my very favorite videos that we ever made, so please enjoy that. And when we come back in 10 minutes, 12 minutes, I'm going to introduce Dr. Annalie to you guys. She has amazing information, so make sure you come back. Thank you for watching.
I got to a place where I felt like I was hopeless and that nothing was ever going to be better for me and that the pain wasn't worth dealing with every day.
When they said my wife would never walk again, that was extremely difficult for both of us. We didn't really know where to go from there.
I had spent 10 years looking for some form of treatment which wasn't available in Australia. We wanted to be a normal family again and be able to do things together.
I was raised by a chiropractic father who very early on taught me a love for caring about people, healing people, but I think most importantly, he taught me that it's not the 8 out of 10 people that you help that keep you going, but you really become obsessed with the 2 out of 10 people that you cannot help.
I have CRPS, I've had it 8 years, and I'm here because it's the first place that I found that offers hope for an incurable disease. I was told for many years that I just had to live like this and survive like this. I've traveled the country seeing other doctors and nobody was able to offer me any permanent solution.
I was okay with the diagnosis EDS because I just thought it was over flexible joints, but then the pain started getting worse and worse. I went to so many doctors and it was all the same things that they would tell me. They just never seemed to have the right answer.
The system that these patients currently face in the USA, but all across the world, is a system of symptom treating. So medically, what they try to do for these people is lower their pain, and that is done in various ways. To me, the body can heal itself from within, but that is not always a straightforward process.
The CRPS spread into my entire body.
We researched it for a couple of years and trying to see how we could come here, and now we're here and we're hoping for the best here.
I've only been here 3 weeks. I haven't bent my leg in 10 years, and I'm sitting here right now with my leg bent. I don't know how to explain this because I'm really new in this program, but the hope, the life it's already given back to me has been incredible. The research paid off.
When you typically walk into a medical office, everyone is very isolated. You see one doctor about your GI tract, and you see another doctor about your brain and your nervous system. And you see a doctor about your joints, and you see a doctor to control your pain. And very few of these people ever sit around a round table and say, we truly love this patient, we care about this patient, let's compare notes, because we're treating a whole body, we're not just treating a body part. And so it is crucial that you treat the entire person and that you love the patient.
Alrighty. You want this? Yes. It's like I wouldn't know.
Our treatment is focused on base level, the central nervous system, and normalizing that system, finding anything that interferes with it and removing it so that the body can heal from within. And because of that, it really doesn't matter if the patient suffers from complex regional pain syndrome or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or POTS. It doesn't matter because we're not treating the symptom or the label, we're treating the patient and the central nervous system.
We did some fundraising to help me get here. To be honest, I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. I knew that it was basically my last hope, and that I should embrace every aspect of it, which I've done, and it's been the most incredible experience of my life.
So I started out just using my own technique to reactivate, to stimulate the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a nerve that runs at the jugular vein in the carotid artery that controls inflammation in the body. And it is such an important part of our nervous system, and we're starting to touch on this nerve in rheumatoid arthritis research, all sorts of research, where reactivating that nerve, waking it up, is massively beneficial to these chronic pain patients. My technique centered around stimulating that nerve and repeating that process until it was doing its job again. So it was a simple process, but then trying to look for perfection, trying to lift my success rates, I started adding techniques. Today, I would say my most valuable tool and my greatest gift is the team that I have surrounded myself with. My family members are invaluable in this process. Dr. Honali, Dr. Lucas bring such an important part to the table. But then my staff members are absolutely exceptional.
Down a little bit more. 3, 2, 1, up. Come away.
Each of us play our own integral part. I do the nutrition. We have our therapists that do very, very hard work, not only to physically support them, but emotionally and mentally support them along the way.
My specialty in the clinic is working with the emotional stress. Most of these people have huge emotional issues connected to their condition, and that is what I love to do, and that's what I take care of.
Seems like the glitches in the autonomic system.
When I first got there, they said, we don't care what your label is. We're here to help you. They don't care about the letters that the doctors had gave us, whether it's CRPS or EDS. They don't care what that is. They're here to help us.
You know, one of the things that challenge for us and for many people when you go to a program like this that oftentimes insurance doesn't cover, it's challenging. I look back and I remember that night that we decided to come down to the clinic in Arkansas. we were talking about this and talking with the staff. They told us how much it was going to be, and I thought for a split second, wow. But then I thought, hold on, you can't put a value on your child's life.
From the time I first have contact with patients, whether they're at home or in the clinic, I want to let patients know that I understand that they haven't been believed, that they haven't been given hope before, and that I hear what they're saying and I understand what they're saying and I believe them.
When you walk into our doors, there's always laughter, sometimes there's tears, but there's this great sense of not being isolated anymore, not being alone anymore. It gives me great pleasure when I walk out to my waiting room and I've got someone from Wisconsin who's 60 maybe, sitting next to a 12-year-old from Australia, and they're becoming best friends because the thing they share in common is that they have survived excruciating daily pain.
It's been the most incredible experience of my life to meet other people with CRPS, which I had never really done in Australia, but not only to meet them, but to meet other people with such a positive attitude toward the condition and toward treatment was incredible.
Ready to go?
Yeah.
All right, come on back.
Let's do it.
End of the week session, eh?
Yeah, bring it on.
Ready for the weekend. I've had patients from all over the world. I found myself here because I enjoy helping people retain the quality of life. Doing very well, Melinda. All right, little by little, okay? Don't go big, start small, and work it up. So seeing these patients, whether it be touching their toes, taking a run around the block here, that's very important. And not only is it important for the patient, it's important for us here to see that our work is coming to fruition.
We have been through hell and back, but we're here, we feel safe here, and we're gonna beat this, and I cannot thank Dr. Katinka and her staff enough.
I'm constantly looking to become better, to become more cutting edge, to find new techniques, to find new methods, to find new equipment. I'm doing research about genetics to try to put all these puzzle pieces together so that eventually, hopefully, we can reach 100%. In my lifetime, I'm certainly dedicated to try to get there.
We don't have all of the pieces of the puzzle yet, but as far as I can tell, this is the best shot they have.
When we ring our bell at the end of the treatment, we have a ceremony where patients walk up to a bell and they ring it if they've reached the level of healing that they set out to reach.
So grateful that somebody gave her hope. Pretty much every day I look and go, "Cow, we're doing normal people stuff. We're sleeping at night. We haven't been to the emergency room in a year."
And we were there, I mean, that was our second home.
Yeah, we were there.
So we were there all the time.
Every other week, easily every other week.
And I always love it when doctors say, well, that's kind of voodoo medicine, or that's not proven or anything. And I say, well, I've got proof right here.
Yeah.
They saved Emily's life.
Dr. Katinka had hope for everybody. She never gave up on anybody, and I really liked that.
Had a lot of bumps in the road, but I never gave up. I never wavered from knowing that this is the place that I'm going to get well, and I'm finally starting to see breakthroughs, which is life-changing.
This place is so incredibly supportive, and everyone here knows what you're going through, but to have my husband with me, and to have him stand by my side through 10 years of hell, and now have him watch me fight to get my life back is so incredibly amazing, not just for me, for us, for our marriage, for our family. And I just don't know how to thank her enough.
And so I never promise a patient that we can help them. I promise them that we're going to try together, and I will not leave a stone unturned trying to help them get their life back.
I just quickly want to address one question I got during the remission about Charcot-Marie Tooth syndrome. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. I've never treated a patient with that, but I'm familiar with it. You have to remember that once upon a time, we had weird applause. Once upon a time, my first complex regional pain syndrome.
It's so good to see some of your faces and really all
had
of
to be
your
my
faces.
first patient.
I've
You guys,
talked
we're just
to
going to sort our
doctors
glitch out real
all
quick.
across the
Bear
country.
with us. We're good.
Sorry.
I, for one, really enjoyed that.
So I had to have my first complex regional pain syndrome patient. Now, there's definitely a genetic variant. We talked about Pandora's box, but the very interesting thing is that monozygotic, identical twins with the same syndrome, same set of genetics, will show different levels of expressing symptoms with that condition. So that leads me to believe that there is good probability that it can be helped with the correct therapy and support. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Hanali Vandermeer. She is my younger sister. I'm saying younger because you guys can't tell just looking at us.
They don't. They often guess wrong. I guess it's because you're the fun sister or something, the redhead.
She's the smart one. We're complete opposites, and that lends itself very well to our practice. She is the chemistry nerd. She loves facts, she loves data, she loves research. I do too, but she cannot stand a puzzle without a solution. And so she is the mind you want on your case to manage your actual blood chemistry. She is absolutely brilliant. Often we have a 2-day program where patients come here, we analyze their blood work and start them on supplementation and viral management programs, bacteria infections, whatever they need to prep them for treatment. They'll come back after this just happened this last week, after 6 months, and say, your sister already changed my life just with supplements. And so we're working on making her care available. If you're just hopelessly stuck in the country where you are, and coming to the US is absolutely not in your book, there's still a lot you can do at home. And recently, with HIPAA restrictions being lifted because of the coronavirus, we can now use telemedicine. So we can analyze blood work. And here in the next 2 weeks, we're going to announce to you guys how we're going to do that. Also, just wanted to say real quick, if you haven't already booked a consult with me, I'm offering you today a $49 consult with me. And trust me, this is not about the money for me. It's an opportunity to have 20 minutes with you, answer specific questions, and individually connect with you. If you have specific questions about care, if you're considering coming here for treatment and you just want to connect with me. So in order to book that, you can go to drkatinka.com, dr.katinka.com. My parents did not think that I was going to be all over the internet when they named me, guys. I spent my life spelling my name. So without any further ado, I'm going to step out of the frame and give the floor to Dr. Hanali. She has incredible knowledge to hand to you guys. You want me to stay?
Please, you stay. I have questions for you as we go.
So, Dr. Hanali, you were reluctantly pulled into the complex region.
Yes, we're very different emotional people. I don't do good with all of the feels, so I just asked Dr. K last night, how do you do this and why would you choose to do this every day? You know, we were up at, I think it was 11 last night, belly aching about one of our patients with some challenges right now. I am very much, I live in the lab, I like the details, but emotionally I cannot connect with people that way. I have to step away and get some fresh air there. So this distance treating for me is phenomenally interesting. It's interesting. We've learned so much and we continue to grow as we go. I mean, the things I've learned in the last 2 years, and I know we're by no means done, that, you know, there's so much more with this that we can do, and that I know that in the next 10 years, probably what we do will be a whole lot different anyway.
Yeah, we're learning as we're going. And I wish, the tens of thousands of dollars that has been donated to research for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and complex regional pain syndrome, and this money is going to spinal cord stimulators and ketamine. Come on, guys. Can we do better? Can we look at the body as a whole? Our information is crucial. It can benefit these communities as a whole. It needs to get out there. And Dr. Anneli, you specialize in patterns with our patients.
Yes, some of the things I want to talk about is even before you get here, things we see in the history, things we see in the physical exam. One of the first things we started seeing early on, I think we were well within our first 100 patients, where at that point in time, Dr. Katinka was doing a lot of the patient face up work, and then in the later phases, I would do the patient down, where they were on their stomach and the table. And we started seeing, and Kaylee will perhaps put a photo for us afterwards. It's interesting, if you lift people's hair, a lot of our patients have this pink spot in their hairline in the upper neck. And I said to her, I see this in your patients, but I don't see it in my general population, just the average Joe off the street for neck and low back pain. This seems to be very, very specific to your CRPS patients, your fibromyalgia patients. We see patterns of the POTS, the low blood pressure with heart rate issues. We see that all the time.
Yes.
My phlebotomist has gotten so good at catching people when they pass out in blood draws. And I swear it's not because we're rough. They just, before you even get to them, they have such low blood pressure that anything that is even slightly stressful, they go down for the count. And to make it extra interesting, they don't come to like other patients. They stay out, and they will, if you prop them in a chair, it may be a few minutes before you get them back. We see issues with digestive system problems years prior to the CRPS or the fibromyalgia. There is a connection there, where the mom will say, yes, 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 but that was prior. She's always, since she was born, there was reflux, picky eater, allergic to everything. So we see these patterns that we learn from.
Childhood asthma is a very big connecting link too.
Yes, now we're starting to put these pieces together and starting to understand them a little bit more. We had one of the questions I read earlier was female difficulty with their cycles and pain flares, and is there a connection? Well, we're going to talk about high yield testing and low yield testing. And so one of the things I don't recommend in the beginning is extensive hormone testing. For one thing, when we start making these changes, it's going to take your body about 6 months for the hormones to start regulating themselves. So in the beginning, what we very much do is we move away from the specialized testing and we break it back down to the very basics. The fundamental stuff that as you move from specialist to specialist often get left out. So it's a huge frustration when we work with patients. They say, oh, all the blood work's been done, and they send me a whole suitcase full of things. And it's all these very, very expensive things. And then there are the simple things that people missed. So I want to just touch on that. The blood work that we need in order to help you, if you're going to approach me from an outside situation, many of you that are in other countries, we need a complete blood cell count with the differential. It's very important that you get the differential. We need to see what kind of white blood cells your body, what it's making. We need a metabolic panel that's going to tell us about your different organ functions and how well they are working together. We need a lipid panel that's integral to brain health. And by the way, what we see with the lipid levels in most of our patients, instead of high cholesterol, y'all tend to have low lipid levels, you have low blood pressure, you have low blood sugar. It's the opposite of the general population.
Stuff that you think is good.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I get my patients all the time where they say, my doctor said I'm fine. Everything looks beautiful. And then you look at the blood work and you say, no, not really. But we do it in baby steps. We look at your iron levels. We look at your inflammatory markers. Basic things that they miss, like a urine analysis. When is the last time somebody had you pee in a cup and took a look at it and see if you had an infection? Just this past week, and I'm just drawing, this is literally in the past week, I had a case of a bacterial infection in the vaginal canal. Well, that's really easy to establish if it's there. We have a case with one of our male patients right now that we had a bit of an issue with in the beginning. His turned out, as far as we can tell, to be a prostate infection. And it's a chronic infection. These are not acute infections. So if your doctor looks at your blood work and says, well, it looks fine, they basically look at two things. They look for a high white blood cell count, fever, and if you have that, you have an infection. Anything other than that, they just don't even really acknowledge it as an infection. So we had another gentleman with a question about herpes virus. Well, that is a chronic infection. Some of the infections that we struggle the most with are the herpes family of viruses. There are 6 of them. You know, everybody knows about herpes 1, herpes 2, but the Epstein-Barr virus is a herpes virus. The cytomegalovirus is a herpes virus. Now, 80% of the population test positive to Epstein-Barr. We all have mono, usually somewhere within our life. But the problem for our chronic pain patients is that they struggle to suppress the virus. They have chronic flares and outbreaks. And what we do is, where we get phenomenal results, is to support the immune system. So we don't give you things that suppresses that. We give you things that will stimulate the immune system to get it to function better, where literally, if you get a herpes virus, by the way, very interesting research, it lives in the vagus nerve. And so we know that as a key part of this whole bigger picture. But the idea with viruses, and you know, viruses being all over the news, I think we're a little fatigued, burned out on that discussion. But the idea with viruses is never to kill it. You can't kill a virus, it's already dead, it's a little piece of DNA. Is to get your body to recognize the virus and then quit copying it to suppress it. So once you have viruses, they pretty much live in your system for the rest of forever. And like bacteria, we're starting to understand that they do play a role.
So, Dr. Nia, a question we get a lot is, I'm watching is, why can't I just go get on antivirals through my GP?
I wish they worked. We get the patients on them. We don't see, you know, they can sometimes tell a difference that if they do get off of them, they tend to get more flares, but they don't work. We use things that are softer. I think one of the key mistakes that I made in the beginning when I started this work is we went after the most powerful antivirals we could find, and that's not necessarily the best thing. With your chronic pain syndrome patients, more is not always more. Less is sometimes more. So over time, we have moderated our response. If you're going to kill off a bacteria, the worst thing we can do is to kill them off all at once. So we do it slowly and steadily at a pace that your body and your nerve system can handle.
Because if you kill off a virus or bacteria, you have toxic byproducts.
Yes, and it's the Herxheimer reaction,
detoxification.
And they feel miserable. So a lot of the formulas that I got from other doctors when I started doing this work, we found was just overkill. So in time, we've dropped a lot of things that in the general population, we call them the normal people population, work well, but in our local population of patients with chronic pain may be overkill. So we gently do things. Any more questions from you?
No, I'll let you go through
some of the lobule testing, and feel free to interject. Things that I see a lot of with you guys coming from specialists. And I just want to say there's nothing wrong with these tests. They do, in other patient populations, do very well. But we see a lot of these tests, and I get a lot of blood work from many clinics and hospitals all over the country. And so I see a lot of tests that if I see the heading of the test, I go, oh, this is probably going to be normal. And then you read through it and you say, yes, that was a money not well spent, is what I'm going to call it. So some of the things that, in my opinion, is not first line testing that you want to do, you may want to try other things first. There's some of the very expensive autoimmune testing, the immunoglobulin testing that they do, and also the immunoglobulin therapies, in my opinion. We've had quite a few patients go through that. We had one patient that asked about stem cell therapy. I have had some negative experiences with that in our patients, and I believe you have too.
I have, 2 weeks ago, I heard of someone that got stem cell therapy and had a good experience. So never say never. We're just taking all our patient population and say, for the most part, it hasn't worked for our patient population. But then again, we don't see people that are in remission, because why would they have to? So we're seeing the cases that are not successful. But it's a car engine that's fundamentally broken, and just to put in jet fuel isn't going to fix the problem long term.
We talk a lot about treating the smoke and not the fire. So a big problem that we see with other therapies is that they see smoke and they say that's the cause, it's causative to the fire, and we're going to go after the smoke. Well, it's a part of the picture, but sometimes when you treat the smoke, if you have a fire and you open the window to let the smoke out, you are on the back end feeding oxygen to something else. I will use a simple example. And by the way, I use this because this is one of the mistakes I made in the beginning. If you, in the initial screening, pick up iron anemia, there is a very specific process that the body goes through to try to contain especially bacterial infections, where it'll take your iron and go lock it up in a storage version, and the average doctor doesn't check that storage iron, they just check serum iron levels. At which point they will say, well, no wonder you're fatigued, you've got iron anemia, and we're going to start either, big supplementation or even worse, iron transfusion, in which case we see huge flares with these patients. So that's one of the things where you see smoke and you treat the smoke as the fire, but it's not the fire.
Why does iron flare the infection?
Bacteria use iron to multiply. And so your body is actually clever enough that it'll take iron and go put it in the pantry. It's a little bit like what parents do. Nighttime, you put the chocolate on the top shelf where the kids can't get it, otherwise you're not going to get any sleep tonight. So when you give these patients iron, all of a sudden that infection flare, but also the nerve pain that goes with that. So for us, sometimes if I have a very, very tricky infection that we can't locate, it's stubborn to treat, and we need to identify it a little bit more, we will do exactly that. We'll give them a bit of iron. They'll come back 2 days later and tell you exactly where the infection is. They'll say, I found it. And so it depends where we are in the treatment if we're going to do the iron or not. Usually we like to kind of get into remission a little bit and then fix that problem.
That was a very good question from me.
Let's talk about gallbladder removal. We see quite a few of
ton of that.
Ton of that. And I have yet to find a single one of them that came back and said that made me feel better because of the pain. There's the sense of fullness here after eating with gastroparesis where the food won't go. Well, that mimics gallbladder problems a lot. So if you see enough doctors, at some point, one of them, because that's what they do, they take it out. And if you feel better, they say, good, that's what that was. And in the average population, that works well. For our patients, I call it ghost gallbladder. Even when the gallbladder is out, they'll say the pain, the digestive problems, the stool issues still there. If anything, it's worse now. So I tell patients, hold on to your gallbladder for now. There is some of the studies that I've seen in our patients where they have sent portions of the gallbladder tissue away for evaluation. It has to do with that eosinophilic buildup that we see in people with mast cell issues. That happens in not only the gallbladder, but the lungs.
What's an eosinophil, Dr. H?
It's a white blood cell that deals with allergies, so seasonal allergies, you get poison ivy, food sensitivities, that kind of thing. You have eosinophils build up in the system.
And a mast cell?
A mast cell activation is, you know how we get these darlings in the alternative medicine world where you hear it and you want to, in front of a patient, you have to fight not rolling your eyes back in the back of your head because it's the new flavor of the month. It goes SIBO. For years, we got stuck on SIBO. Now, I'm not saying SIBO is not a thing. It is a thing, but SIBO is not the cause of every problem and the cause of everything. And if you fix SIBO, it's not going to be the fix for anything or everything. It's a part of the puzzle. It's a part of the smoke. It's a part of the dysfunction. You need to ask, how and why did the SIBO happen in the first place? So we went through the SIBO. The newest one that we had to deal with in the last few months is the CRPS. It's the chronic inflammatory mold exposure. And so then you go through a phase where, according to people, all CRPS, all fibromyalgia is caused by mold exposure. And these poor people rip every part, they move houses, they relocate to drier states, only to realize that I still don't feel any different. Now, there is such a condition just in our line of patient care. Those are the things we move to at a later phase if we don't make progress. In the beginning, we don't do those severe things. Some of the things that we look at for patients, my role is to remove obstacles to treatment. So I have to get you to the point where you feel and function well enough to be strong enough for the treatment, and you can talk about that. It is not an easy treatment. It's not a spa. You don't get to drop off your body and then leave. It's not like that. It's hard work.
No back rubs.
No back rubs.
Or spa music for the most.
So what I do is, first of all, to figure out how to feed you better. We have a very difficult population of patients to feed. When you work with the normal population, it's always how do we get the handbrake up to get them to eat less and to eat healthier. With you guys, it's how to feed them anything. How do we get them to eat to the point where they're strong enough for the treatment, to get enough protein in them, because you're going to build a ton of muscles while you're here to be able to do that. We fix the immune system problems that we see, the infections. We've already talked about that, and I can touch on that more if we have some more time, but there are some of my older lectures on the Burning Limb Foundation. If you want to go look at that, I bet you've already watched those. I don't want to repeat myself.
You can include the link.
Okay. We look at vitamin D deficiencies and other nutritional deficiencies that comes from the terrible eating habits that we see. The adrenal glands is very much a challenge, is to support the adrenal glands, because one of the byproducts of pain over such a long time is that the adrenal glands eventually fatigue. With not sleeping well and having such high pain levels over a period of time, is you see these people start running into adrenal fatigue. So their pupils will go from pinpoint to more dilated. They go from being hyper and stressed to being, we call it a flat effect. You can't get them excited about anything. They're just very blah, they talk slowly. It becomes very hard for them to tolerate cold. So they're usually wrapped up in blankets when they get in here. Low blood pressure, lots of heart rate issues. And again, that overlaps some of the other things we see. Problem sleeping. And so in the beginning, the getting them to sleep, that's very much your work in the therapist. I think we wear them out in the day where eventually they have no choice. But to support the adrenal system, and some of the most remarkable things we see in here is to see a patient change from time, from when they get here. Sometimes halfway through the treatment, I'll walk up to them, reintroduce myself and say, it's a pleasure to meet you finally, because whoever you seen in the beginning, that was not you.
Your representative.
It was a body double.
A bad one.
Yeah, it's like with Kim Jong-un now that they say, well, was it him or was it a body double? We need to see the photos. Well, our patients are like that. We get to meet the body double. And when the mental fog and all of that comes off, you get to meet actually who's there.
Oh, it's my favorite part of their treatment. I'm so glad you brought it up, because there's a certain joy and spark that is lit from within that is distinguished when you're in so much chronic pain. And we all learn to recognize that magic. It's usually about week 5 or 6, sometimes earlier. One day it's just on, and it's like the patient is glowing from within again. And when you see that, you have hope.
And then I want to talk to you a little bit about emotionally, the things we see, because you're not just treating the patient, you're treating the family unit, really, when they're here, especially the mother-daughter combinations we found. When you are the mother of a sick child, and I speak from experience, you get such a different relationship from a regular mom and a kid that really, in a way, you're almost close friends. And then when they start getting better, one of the frequent things I see is mom will be so excited and the kid gets really annoyed. It's like, no, almost, the fact that I have zero pain today, please quit pointing that out. I don't want you to highlight on that. I'm not comfortable with that. And I always try to pull the mom aside and say, they're still waiting for the other shoe to drop. They're not there yet. It will hit them sometimes months after finishing treatment. They'll get their aha moment of, I'm probably better. But at that point, it'll be in some random place and they'll have a complete emotional meltdown. And then you will think, what in the world? What's that about?
Yeah, the recovery is a strange thing. You may watch this today and think, if I could just get my life back, that would be nothing but awesome. And whipped cream and strawberries and angel music all the way. And the truth is a little more complicated. If you've had complex regional pain syndrome we have a gentleman here, 24 years, I call it the Rip Van Winkle syndrome, especially if you have a sick child. That kid misses out on all the normal stages of development, going to the prom, having boyfriends or girlfriends, playing with their friends, participating in sports, going to school in a normal way. And it very much changes the family unit, whether you're an adult or a child. people act differently around you. They're almost like the caretakers of alcoholics in a weird way. Their whole life becomes dependent on whether you're having a good day or a bad day. With your child, you learn to watch them like a hawk. You know, are they in pain? Are they good? Are they bad? You're asking them all the time, how are you feeling? You know, that becomes your project. And when that project all of a sudden starts to recover, you're left with this void and this trauma of you're not okay. And I was trained for every second of the day to worry about you. And then you don't have a normal parent-child relationship because you probably let your kid get away with a little bit more just because they're in pain. You try to make up for it in other ways, which is understandable, but not good long term. You know, we create little monsters in a sense. And I've had my child patients say, I'm thinking of Stella now. You know I got by with a lot, but that's just the way it was. And so we highly recommend when you leave here to, if you're an adult, go into counseling with your significant other, with your parents, family counseling, and definitely counseling for children and family counseling to learn how to be normal again. A question, Dr. Oni, that I did want to touch on, because I know you guys have this in your minds. Are there general foods that I should or should not be eating?
That's a good question. We do the food sensitivity testing. Now, I just want to say, yes, that's very controversial before you email bombard me. The food sensitivity testing is different than food allergy testing. So if you did your testing through a medical doctor, you need to go look at the top of the page. It will say either IgE, which is food allergy testing, is the only kind that the insurance companies and medical doctors recognize. That's the kind of thing like peanuts and shrimp, where if you eat it, you get a hives immediate, you get anaphylaxis, you can die. The food sensitivity testing that we're talking about is IgG. It's slow delayed and it's a sensitivity, it's not an allergy. You can go for years eating these foods and not know about it. I mean, I turned out to be allergic to almonds, and for years, when we're at my mom's house, I would drink a beer, and she always has a bowl of nuts. And I felt terrible, and I always blamed it on the beer, and I would leave and say, I'm never going to do that again, and when you're over again, you do it again. And I think I was pregnant with number 2, where I just had the nuts and not the beer, and I thought, it's the nuts, I feel horrible. But it takes a few hours, up to 72 hours for that to develop. So we get a lot of results from that test. That's one of the high yield tests that we use that shows us what is safe for you to eat. You know, if you eat a food that's going to mess up your digestive system for the next 72 hours where we can't get food in you, it's hugely negative for our whole treatment protocol here. Some of the more common foods that we see, that I see overlaps for our patients, there is a few random ones on there that I still can't explain. Bananas, don't eat bananas. And then gluten and grains, that's kind of the industry standard. Everybody gets the gluten and the grains. Dairy, funny enough, is about 50-50, and we include in dairy eggs. So some of our patients can, some cannot. And that was one of the ones you remove it in the beginning and then later you add it on to see if it agrees or not, if you're going to do the food with the removal instead of doing the blood test. Other random things that I've seen issues with almonds, I mentioned soy products. We see a lot of green peas. A lot of you guys are sensitive to green peas and whey. So protein shakes, moms out there trying to put protein shakes in kids, we get a lot of negative results with those. Later on, we do like to utilize them. Vanilla flavoring, I see a lot of problems with. I don't know if that goes back to Coca-Cola, that we kind of picked that up. And pineapple.
When you say Coca-Cola, it's because when you do a thing a lot, your body tends to become sensitive to it, especially if that thing is not good for you.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of us drink Coke at some point.
And also sometimes vegetables. You've got to be careful. If you have a kiddo and you feed them a certain vegetable and they flare, you need to believe them. Some of that is Roundup, buildup within our patient population. They have genetic mutations that makes them a little bit worse at detoxing these particular chemicals.
A very helpful tip I can give you guys. It is absolutely worth the money. I believe it's less than $200, and I wish we had a local company here that produces ozone products. You buy an ozone pod. It looks almost like a hockey puck, and you drop it in a sink of water for about half an hour with your produce, fruits, vegetables, potatoes is very dirty, and leave that in there. The ozone will neutralize some of those molecules, the Roundup, all the bad things on the fruits and vegetables, especially if you don't have money to constantly buy organic produce. This is a very, very good investment. And you can also ozonate water. You just have to drink it within 10 minutes if it's not refrigerated. Sorry, just random tip.
Where are we on time? Do you guys want to go to questions?
We have a few questions. It's 12:55, so
Okay.
I can start asking those. Are there, this question kind of has two parts. Are there any foods that are high in copper, and is high copper an issue?
High copper is somewhat of an issue, but one of the things I will say before I get into this is the heavy metal toxicity testing that I see a ton of. I've seen over 300 sets of that in CRPS and fibromyalgia patients. Tend to not be very high yield tests, meaning that's not the problem. I can see their thinking behind thinking that may be the causative agent. Now, copper, yes, copper is a problem, especially if you ever lived in a house that was older than, built somewhere in the 50s where they had copper piping. Copper opposes zinc, and so it's harder to get your zinc up to levels that it needs to be to fight viruses successfully if you take any supplementation with copper in it. So as a rule, when my patients come in, we go through the supplements you are taking. If there is any significant copper, and by that I mean more than 1% of your daily allowance, I pull the supplement. All of the supplements I use is free of copper. Or if you absolutely have something you have to hold onto that is got that much copper in it, we're going to have to give you a boatload of zinc on the back end to kind of push the copper off the receptors, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there are, most multivitamins will have copper in them, but if you look copper-free multivitamins, you will find them because it also can very much resemble early Alzheimer's with copper, where it causes brain fog and fogginess and forgetfulness.
Two of the companies I like that have a lot of copper-free product lines and they're easily available is Designs for Health is a good company, and Biotics.
Perfect. Could you repeat what you said to buy to counter the Roundup?
It's an ozone pod, so it's a small pod that it feels strange because it's plugged into a wall, and you throw it and the electric cord in a sink of water, but you can do it. You can do it with your bathtub water that you're going to bathe in.
But not while you're in the house.
Not while you're in the house. Same with the toaster, don't put it in the bathtub with you when it's plugged in. So yes, so it's an ozonator pod. And if you go to any company that manufactures ozone, room cleansers and things that you can inhale or clear your sinuses with, or there's a way to do it in your ear. Lots of products. Ozone is a fantastic product that fights viruses and bacteria. And the pod, you can submerge in water. And Kelly, I can actually look that up for you guys and do an informal plug of our company here locally and tell you exactly what the pod is that you need to buy. Another quick thing I didn't mention, you may have seen my video before, a product that I absolutely endorse. You can get it on our website, theSperoClinic.com. Is it the or theSperoClinic.com, and scroll all the way down to our earthing grounding products. Is a mat that you sleep on at night that connects with the earth's surface that decreases inflammation in the body. just a great thing to do, and your kids should certainly be sleeping on if you have wireless internet in your house.
Awesome. Another question for Dr. Honnelly. Have you had patients following a whole foods plant-based diet, and what are your findings with it?
Yes.
Many times.
Lots of them. First of all, I was vegan for 5 years, so I come from some point of experience on that. We do move them through the program successfully. It is somewhat tricky, and it depends how well the program was done. The person doing that, how well did they do the research? Are they taking certain supplements like the B12? Are they able to get a whole lot of plant-based proteins, and do they get enough plant-based proteins? So yes, it is technically possible. It is harder to do, but we have done it.
And you guys, what we've also seen inexplicably is patients in their 60s eating fried chicken. This guy's from Arkansas, he's local. We love fried food in the South. Smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, going into remission. So the body is kind of incredible. I don't want you guys to think that you have to live these perfect lives and you can never have treats or drink wine or eat cupcakes when you leave if you want to be healthy, because if you do good most of the time, your body can handle some bad.
And the body has the phenomenal ability to heal itself. I can think of a few patients, you're working with a group of people that may or may not have developed some bad habits as they work through this, sometimes decade after decade. So drug use, some of it opioid abuse, some of it illicit off the street. We've had patients come in with such extensive needle damage in the arms that we couldn't find blood vessels. We had to go in between the toes to get blood. And still they get better. So it's possible. Yeah. Lots of things are possible.
I think this will be our last question. If you can talk a little bit about the connection to headaches. Someone wants to know if our treatments are specific to headaches, like chronic daily headaches with aura and migraines, and does CRPS equate the same to headaches as it does to the rest of the body?
Yes, and you can talk on that too. I can see you're itching, but yes, from our point of view, some of that may be, not always, but maybe due to that Epstein-Barr virus has a habit of being in here. So frequent sore throats, headaches, chronic headaches, inflammation around the meninges of the brain. So those headaches typically don't respond well to the over-the-counter meds that they give for regular migraines. But yes, we see that's one of the things that we actually use, I believe, when we establish directions when doing the vagus nerve treatment. We love for our patients to come in with a headache. It takes some of the guessing work out of it because we can faster establish directions. We do that based on the headache improving when we hit the right direction.
Yeah, it's one of the slower things to respond about week 7, 8, typically, but reliably they respond. So when I do history intake and the patients say, oh gosh, migraines, I'm not even worried about that part. That's the least of our issues because it just tends to resolve as the cranial nerves are sorted, the infections come under control. It's just something you see a lot with chronic pain patients or migraines.
We actually do have 2 more questions, and I think a lot of people will be interested in these, so I'm going to read them really quick. The first one is, can you briefly talk about your opinion on cannabis or CBD oils?
We're okay with it. I mean, I would guess about 80% of the patients coming in is actually on some level of it. It's one of the things I see people move away from rather quickly. Not because I think people use it to try to fix something, and if you get rid of the problem, they figure out that the product that they were using is not actually making it better or worse. As your mind clarity improves too, as you move through the program, it's almost like that hinders them. they start getting addicted to this feeling of having a clearer mind and being present, and that they feel that interferes is one of the feedbacks I've gotten from patients. But we've had people do extensive cannabis all the way through the program with no intent of stopping. I mean, it's pretty much a legal product now.
Yeah, I'm not, it's certainly not my world, and I'm always willing to admit I sat in a very brilliant lecture when we did our conference in Cincinnati last year, where they had someone very knowledgeable in cannabinoid receptors and all of that world. So there are definitely worse things you can do to get yourself out of pain. You know, I don't have strong opinions on it. I see a life for you. I hope for a life where you don't need a crutch, even if it's a natural crutch. But I'm not judgmental about that world at all. I believe that lecture is also on YouTube, but we can find out.
Okay, last question. Dr. Honnelly or Dr. Katinga, do you find a lot of your patients have post-herpetic neuralgia, and how do you treat that? I had shingles 7 years ago and still have pain in that location.
The herpes virus lives inside the vagus nerve, and so any nerve damage that where the body starts repairing nerve damage mimics the vagus nerve inflammation, and so the body will attack that site. So that, for me, yes, we have seen it. Yes, we deal with it quite a bit. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, that typically responds really well. I actually had a very severe patient with post-herpetic neuralgia. 2 of them, one speech, her name is Julie, and she spoke as if she had a stroke. Her cranial nerves were also affected. And within a few treatments, she's back on video. Her speech is different. It's just crazy. And then I had a patient that couldn't even take a shower without screaming in pain because of post-herpetic neuralgia. I haven't seen her in 9 years, and she's still symptom-free. So I believe that's something with help that the body can absolutely repair. You guys, you asked really good questions, and
I want to say to you, I know you guys can't see me, but you can hear me. I am going to get an email out to everyone that is going to include as many links as possible, links to how you can sign up for a consult, links to the burning limb, links to the books, everything, but that will be done on Monday. So just wait to get that from me, and it'll include everything you need.
Kelly, can show your face. Kelly works behind the scenes with you guys. She works so hard on this conference. She's here on a Saturday working. And I'm so proud of her and my entire team because they're absolutely phenomenal. If I can end this, number 1, definitely get a consult. If you're thinking about care, if you need extra help, see if Dr. Honnelly can help you with your blood work. Any way we can help to make your life easier. I believe we're sitting on big information. Our approach is going to become more mainstream. In the meantime, the number 1 thing I want you to leave today's conference with is a sense of hope. Our clinic is called the Spero Clinic. Spero means hope in Latin and Italian, and our motto is also Latin. It's Dum Spero Spero, and it means while I breathe, I hope. Do not ever let anybody, including your darkest moments, take your hope away from you, because without it, you're truly lost. Hook into that hope, hold on to that hope. It's the most precious, precious thing that you have, and fight with every bit that you have while you are still breathing, because you are worth it. Thank you for joining today. I had such a great time doing this, and always enjoy getting in touch with this community. So thank you guys, and hope to speak to you soon.
Thank you.